All right, guys. So I was asking just now, anybody remember the definition that was given for mathematics from previous class? Anybody from previous
Sir,
class? Yes, go ahead.
I think you said that mathematics was a expansion of English language, something like that.
All right. So I had mentioned mathematics to be an extension of English language, but I may have mentioned also that mathematics is a study of numbers and quantities. Anybody remember that?
Yes, sir.
Right. So if mathematics is about the study of numbers and quantities, then it makes sense if we understand the number system. And so that's where I want to start. But let us just go back on the definition to see if we clearly understand what we mean by numbers and quantities. Anybody remember what numbers are? What are
Numbers,
yeah, go
count numbers, sir.
Numbers are symbols used to represent size and quantities.
exactly. So there are symbols used to represent the size of quantities. Very good. And so when you see a number, you know exactly the amount that we are dealing with, right? So they have specific values. You know exactly how much you're supposed to have when you see a number. All right, going to quantity now. Anybody knows what quantity means?
The amount, sir.
All
The
right.
amount.
Anybody else want to give an idea? Apart from Ms. Waysal?
Measurable amount.
It's some measurable amount, right? So some measurable amount. The thing though, even though quantities are measurable amounts, we have different types of quantities. Can anybody think of any types of quantity that you can share with us?
Like mass or length.
All right, so we have the quantity, mass, and length. So mass is a measurable quantity, but mass, when we refer to mass, is a special or a specific quantity type of quantity that we're dealing with. So anybody know what we mean by mass? I mean, I know we don't have, well, I'm not going to assume that we have a lot of science person here, but anybody know what mass means?
Like grams, sir, or kilogram.
All right. Grams and kilogram, those are really not the quantity. The quantity is really the mass, but the grams and kilogram would be the unit in which that quantity is measured. Is that clear? So we have,
yes, sir.
And we have the unit of measurement for the quantities, right? So we should be clear on what units are and what the quantities are. Now, so I was looking along what you think the mass of something is. When I say the mass of something, what comes to your mind?
The proportion, sir. A large amount.
Okay. All right. Now, proportion is a little bit general, because if we are dealing with mass as a quantity and we're dealing with length as a quantity, then generally speaking, proportion could apply to any quantity, right? But we really want to say mass in itself. What is it that we're really thinking about as the quantity being measured? What is being measured when we measure mass? All right, let me make it a little easier.
Volume, I'm just.
All right, not volume, but let
Is
me.
it matter, sir?
Yeah, it is really matter. It's the amount of stuff that something is made up of. So we want to say how much matter is in something, and we say that's a mass. When we talk about length, we're really not talking about how much stuff the thing is made up of, but rather what?
Extension, how long or
Right,
short.
right. So how long or short, what extension, what distance. And generally we measure length. Well, later on, you'll realize when we talk about length, we may think of length in two ways, either by distance or by displacement. And when we talk about distance and displacement, even though they might be talking about length, they're really looking at length in a different way. All right. Distance, really, when you talk about distance, you're really talking about how far you have to go in terms of length, whether or not you're going in a winding road or so on. So if you're going around a corner or so on, the distance you'd have to measure the entire curve and so on to get the entire distance. All right. Now, when we talk about displacement though, we're referring to distance in a straight line. All right. So some of these ideas will come clearer later on, especially when we're looking at vectors. All right. And so that is some distance away. So you don't have to worry yourself about vectors now. All right, so we get the idea that quantities are some things that we can measure. And for every quantity, there is a unit. And in mathematics, if you measure a quantity and you're writing the result just by putting down a number and you don't put the unit, then technically you're wrong, right? Because if you say, if the thing is 4 centimeters and you just put down 4, then 4 does not say much about what unit of measurement you're using or what quantity you're really measuring. You get what I'm saying? But by stating the unit, like say centimeters or gram, kilometers, all of those now specify what kind of quantity you're measuring, and that give you an idea. So for your answers to questions, you need to specify your units, right? So if you're measuring in centimeter, you need to say 5 centimeters or so on. Is that clear to everyone? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So bear in mind. Now, so now that we have an idea what quantities are, what numbers are, we know that our world, the world that we're living in, would have different things in it. And all of these things in the world, we find some means of measuring them. All right. No matter how you think something can be measured, we find some way of measuring it. We talk about time. If we're measuring time, what do we use?
Or
Minutes or seconds.
All right. So, and our measurement of time has relationship with how long the earth take to go around the sun, right? And that's how we came up with the idea of measuring time. Now, if we talk about temperature, what temperature is measuring? Anybody?
Degrees Celsius, sir.
All right. Those are units, but what is it measuring? Is it what is temperature measuring?
Fahrenheit or Celsius.
Those are the units. You can measure in Fahrenheit or Celsius. What is
body temperature, heat?
All right, so, well, in a sense, we are measuring heat energy, but when we talk about temperature, we are talking about how hot or how cold something is. All right, so just to quickly remind you, whenever the Zoom shuts down, then you can go right ahead and log back in, because we're only working with a 40 minutes time span for each Zoom session. So you will have it go down about twice before the class ends. Is that clear to everybody? So just bear that in mind. All right, so as I was mentioning, there are many things in the world that we can measure. All right, so mathematics is really a tool of how we can measure the things in our world, right? Now, and this comes to the point that I was making about an extension of English language, because in English language, we use English language to give a qualitative view of the world, meaning that we can describe the world that we are in using our senses. We can say what we see, what we hear, what we smell, and what we taste. So we can qualify or give some description of the quality of the world. But mathematics, on the other hand, give a description of the world, not in the qualitative sense, but rather in the quantitative sense. So we look at the world in a quantitative way. We say that things in the world, we can quantify them and we can measure them. All right, and so every area that deals with mathematics, they're really interested in calculating something, some quantity. You know, if you're in the bank, you may want to calculate money. If you're working as a scientist, you may want to calculate mass, and depends on what science you're doing, maybe length and so on. If you're working in, if you're working in, what do you call it now, some economic system, you may want to look at how the world economy works, and you may want to look at different equations, right? If you're doing some science with formulas, you also may want to do some equations. So all the things that we are learning in maths, they are not really, in a sense, we are not really using one aspect of math in mathematics. When we're looking at math, we are looking at from economics to science. So all the maths that you're learning would be a mixture of all the different areas, right? Now, some people may wonder, why do I need to learn math? And some people might say, well, I don't see the use of math because we don't use it, or we don't use these kind of maths in whatever we're doing. Now, it depends on where you might find yourself and when you might be called upon to use a certain maths. Now, I would like to give you the idea that math would be like an application or an app that you put on your phone, right? You put the app on your phone, it might have many different functions or functionality, but you don't use it until when you need to use it. So learning the maths really is to develop the skills of carrying out some of these calculations. You may never use them if you don't come in the field of doing some of these mathematics problems, but at least you would have learned how to do them after you have gone through this course. And so if the demand arises that you should do certain math, you would have some knowledge or skills of how to do them, right? Because as you get into different areas of work, you may be demanded to do different things, right? Is that clear, guys? So back to the number system now. So the number system has to do with a system of numbers which are different subgroups collectively form one big group. And well, you're limited to the group of real numbers, but we also have a group that we call complex numbers. Now, real numbers are the numbers that we are using in everyday life. We call them real numbers because we use them every day. In anything that we're doing, we might be using these numbers. So they are called real numbers. So what we want to do is to look at what are the numbers that make up the set of real numbers. So that is what we're going to be looking at. So what is a number system? Now, everything in the universe can be grouped into various sets. Now, the set of symbols are the set of symbols that we call numbers. They are used to represent quantities. And this set of numbers form what we call the number system. All right. Now, relationship between the set of numbers in our number system. Now, the number system is divided into the following subsets. Now we have one, counting or natural number. So I'm going to discuss them as we go along. Now, why do we call this number counting or natural number? Can anybody give me any reason why we call them counting or natural numbers?
They are alternate numbers.
All right, now alternate is a word that you may want to be careful with. Because when we talk about alternate, we kind of have an interchanging between two sets when we are dealing with the alternate. So I am not going to use that alternate number. I think I understand what you're saying, but that's not what I'm looking for. Anybody else?
Sir, are there numbers that flow that come one after the other? I don't know.
Well, the name given to them almost give it away. We call them counting numbers because they are what? Numbers that we count.
Positive numbers, okay.
They are numbers that we count with. And we call them natural numbers too, because naturally this is how we count, right? But anyways, we will look at them one at a time. The next one is the whole number. Can anybody say anything about whole number? What do you know about whole number, guys? Miss Cummins, do you know anything about whole number?
I'm
Yeah.
still thinking, sir.
You're thinking about it. All right. Anybody else want to make any comment about counting number? Miss? Whole number, rather.
Whole number, this is just like a regular number by itself, so it's not a fraction or anything. It's just like the number 1, 2, 3. Those are whole numbers.
All right. Now, I'm not going to make any comment about what you are all saying about numbers, because at the end of it all, I will be giving you clarification of how these numbers, what these numbers are, and how to really differentiate among them. Because sometimes the problem is we don't have a clear idea of what the numbers are, and so we may use them in the wrong context. Is that clear, guys? So whole numbers, I won't say anything about what whole numbers is. I talk about counting because I think that's a basic one that everybody should know. Integers. Anybody knows about integers? What do you know about integers?